As President-elect Donald Trump prepares to take office, there's a lot of questions about what his administration will mean for the future of FEMA. This agency has been the subject of attacks and misinformation from Trump, especially in recent months following massive destruction caused by Hurricanes Helene and Milton. Some conservatives have suggested disaster recovery should be handled by individual states instead of the federal government. In an exclusive interview with our Nicole Sganga, FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell says if that happened, some communities might never recover from hurricane season.
You worry that if states are forced to foot most of the bill after major disasters, some communities just won't rebuild.
I think some communities will have to pick and choose the things that they're going to rebuild, which puts them at increased risk for future events because we've already got weakened infrastructure if you're not going to rebuild it. But also we provide funding to help them rebuild in a way that makes them more resilient. If they are going to have to foot most of the bill, then they're not going to take advantage of the additional funds to rebuild in a way that makes them stronger. And it's just going to keep them in this situation where they're more vulnerable to these severe weather events, which is going to make them more susceptible to future impacts.
Nicole joins us now to speak about her exclusive interview from the D.C. Bureau. Nicole, great to have you, and especially on this topic. It's serious. It impacts our viewers. What would these cuts look like that are being feared and discussed?
Yeah. Absolutely, Errol. And just to give you a sense of how tight things are at FEMA right now, FEMA spent half its annual budget 8 days into the fiscal year. Now, that spending was a combination of paying leftover, recovery bills plus back-to-back hurricanes, Helene and Milton. But some conservative thinkers in Project 2025 have proposed shifting the financial burden for disaster recovery from the federal government to state and local governments. And the FEMA administrator said that while state and communities need to have conversations about building their capacity, their resilience, this kind of dramatic shift in how the nation pays its bills after a hurricane, a wildfire, flooding would mean some communities would have to pick and choose how to recover, that they would have to pick and choose what resources in their towns and cities to rebuild. Now, Trump has distanced himself from Project 2025, but he's also appointed Elon Musk to slash our nation's $6 trillion budget to the tune of $2 trillion, and of course, Vivek Ramaswamy.
And your reporting also acknowledges that 2024 was a record-breaking year for FEMA and what it needed to do. Help us understand just how expensive disaster recovery has become.
179 declared disasters in 2024. That is a record. 2024 also saw the second busiest tornado season, more intense wildfires. More than 24 of those disasters had price tags of over $1 billion, with a B, $1 billion. And the recovery costs for Hurricanes Helene and Milton outpaced all previous disasters within the past decade. Criswell told me that climate-driven disasters are leaving some communities more vulnerable in a constant state of rebuild and recovery. I also asked her, back in 2019, President Trump took $155 million from the federal government's disaster release fund and used it to build immigration facilities along the border. Can FEMA afford to have those funds diverted again? She told me she can't even afford to get through the bills that FEMA needs to pay for the rest of the fiscal year, and that any sustained deployment of FEMA personnel outside of its core mission, well, puts disaster response at risk.
So considering that, Nicole, if they may run out of money before the end of the fiscal year, if Congress doesn't act, what happens next?
Yeah, there's a $3.5 billion pot of money left in the disaster relief fund. That might sound like a lot, but the administrator told me she worried that when the West Coast received that tsunami warning, she'd have a couple of weeks, if not days, before the fund went dry. She added that even if she entered into what's called immediate needs funding right now, prioritizing only life-saving and life-sustaining costs while putting off long-term recovery, FEMA would still run out of money by the end of this month. That underscores the concern about cuts to the federal government's spending, because as Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy took meetings on Capitol Hill last week, lawmakers spoke about discretionary funding being the first on the chopping block. And of course, the disaster relief fund, a huge pool of that discretionary spending. Errol?
All right, Nicole Sganga, we appreciate you bringing us your exclusive reporting. Thanks very much.
Thank you.